very much. You're too kind. It's always a pleasure to visit New Zealand. I've had a sabbatical here down in Dunedin, so it's always great to come back and meet new old friends. Particular thanks to you, David, and to John, and also to Ely and Eflin and Polly and others who've got me here, and I'm very impressed with the standard of organisation of the conference. I haven't put my post-it up yet for John, but I promise to do so soon. Okay, my name's Sean Strain, as David has mentioned, although scientifically it's John, Joseph and JJ, so all my papers are JJ, in case you're looking for S. Very few of them are under S. I've just retired at the end of January. Well, I'm still not totally on cold turkey because I've got a few research projects going on. And as David said, I have learnt a lot by being involved in the health claim procedure. It's sometimes embarrassing looking back at my earlier papers and my earlier studies and realizing all the mistakes I made, which I now know were mistakes because I've learned so much in the process. And I think industry has learned as well. So it's the European perspective. We already heard from Patrick that the regulations concerning claims differ worldwide. So maybe I'm leading you up the wrong path looking at the European perspective, but at least the trial and tribulations and learning that has gone on here in Europe might be of some use in New Zealand, where you are starting out in the process. So we've got about 10 years experience. We're certainly, as far as Europe's concerned, not the first to look at health claims. America, of course, was in the 1990s, and this is a spoof claim from satirical magazine The Onion, and indicating what might and could happen in an unregulated environment. And certainly Europe before 2006 was unregulated, and we had loads of claims just like this which had absolutely no chance of being scientifically substantiated. At least the conceptor melt there has come with 4 different mechanisms, each one equally implausible, and a couple of them there would suggest that a topical application might be the way to go about this. So it's reassuring that Alicia from Arizona seems to be putting this product to her mouth, which now actually is the first thing that I want to explain as far as Europe is concerned. For a food to have an effect, it has to be eaten. If it's applied topically, if it's injected or whatever, that's out. So strangely enough, that's what we usually do with food, is to eat it, and that's how we get the effect. The other thing about Europe is that food is food as we know it, as we generally eat it, but food is also supplements. And we've got, as far as those people involved, industry involved in the health claims, we've got a clear dichotomy here. My friends in the Commission tell me that it's a very clear dichotomy. You've got the food industry, which in general are very interested in the S's, that's the science and the substantiation. They also tell me that the supplement industry are more interested in the L's, which is lobbying and litigation. So we do have 2 aspects here, which I will go through, because a lot of the trouble, a lot of the litigation we've had has arisen from the supplement industry rather than the food industry. So what I'll look at first is general considerations. I'll look at the regulation. And the thing that has caused most problems in Europe, and is something that I think all nutritionists here will understand, is the concept of essentiality. And really, as far as claim substantiation is concerned, you really only have 2 categories. You have claims on essentiality and other claims. That's it. Now, claims on essentiality have to be treated differently from all other claims. I think that's obvious to anybody who's a nutritionist. To the industry, and especially the supplement industry, they obviously had never heard of essentiality, even though the concept has been around for over 100 years. So that has caused major difficulties, and I have to go through the concept of essentiality. I then have to look at claims under Article 13.1, because that was originally how essentiality claims were going to be substantiated. If you haven't heard of Article 13.1, I envy your ignorance. That's where most of the evidence, or most of the problems arose with the regulation. In Article 13.1, because politicians changed it, it wasn't fit for purpose. And eventually, I think probably the most interesting from your point of view is how we weigh the evidence. So the regulation. Recital 30, I think that's Euro speak for just really notes which explain what the articles, which are the legal aspects of the regulation. And Recital 30 says, in some cases, scientific risk assessment alone cannot provide all the information on which a risk management decision should be based. Other legitimate factors relevant to the matter under consideration should therefore be taken into account. And what that means is that really you have to assess the science, but then the risk managers, or the science managers in this case of health claims, they can ignore that. They're free to do so. There might be other reasons that come into that they should actually ignore it. So it's two different processes here, and they shouldn't be mixed. They should always be separate. And in Europe, it's separate. It's separate geographically as well as institutions. The risk managers and the risk the legal regulations are quite different. The European Commission, with the regulatory authorities in the 28 member states, they're the ones who manage the risk or manage the science. EFSA assesses the risk. And EFSA is in Parma. It was supposed to be in Helsinki, but Berlusconi, who's the Italian Prime Minister, you probably have heard about him from other reasons apart from diverting EFSA towards Parma. But when it was opened in Parma in 2004 or whatever, the media asked the obvious question, why Parma? Because it was supposed to go to Helsinki, and Berlusconi said, have you ever tasted Finnish food? Which caused a major international difficulties. And but I have to say that there are advantages in going to Parma. It's Parmesan cheese, Parma ham. So there are, even though it's in the middle of nowhere, it's over an hour from the major Milan airports, there are advantages. You can see with the nutrition dietetic products, the NDA is right at the end. We're right at the fork. But there are loads of different panels with EFSA, and you can see that the whole food chain is covered. I was on the NDA panel for 9 years. That's the maximum that you can do, three-year mandates. I chaired the health claims working group, and what we do is we have a number of standing working groups. I chaired this one. I had about 15, 16 people, 20 experts in the NDA panel, and I chaired that for 9 years, and I stepped down last year, but I'm still part of the health claim group. There's about 20 people at the moment in the Secretariat, but you can see that we have the EFSA NDA panel has other duties apart from health claims, but certainly for 3 or 4 years, because of Article 13.1, we had to close down virtually everything else we were doing, and we had to increase the Secretariat because it was just huge amount of work, unnecessary amount of work if the politicians had stayed out of it. Okay, so what I've said, EFSA cannot be responsible for food safety legislation, no legislative powers whatsoever, just assess the science. Take charge of food safety and quality controls, labelling and other issues, or act as a substitute for national authorities. So each of the 28 member states has their own regulatory authority, and they work with the Commission, and they approve claims. We just assess and substantiate the claim. So what EFSA can do, and claims should be scientifically substantiated by taking into account the totality of the available scientific evidence and by weighing the evidence. And that's what you do. There's nothing magical about the way, or different about the way we do it in Europe. Health claims should only be authorised for use in the community after a scientific assessment of the highest possible standard. Now, it's not widely recognised that the whole point of having claims regulation is to protect the consumer. But the main driver to get the regulation into place was the food industry, the major players in the food industry. And they also insisted that the scientific assessment was the highest possible standard. And there are very good commercial reasons for that. The first ones, they wanted to regulate the cowboys. They wanted a level playing field, so you didn't have these totally unsubstantiated claims around. And they also wanted the highest possible assessment because they wanted the consumer to have full confidence that if a claim was substantiated and approved, then the consumer knew that it was valid. Article 6 is interesting because all claims shall be based on and substantiated by generally accepted scientific evidence. So just remember that. What we were expected to do in recital 26, health claims, all of those referring to reduction of disease risk and to children's development health based on generally accepted scientific evidence, should undergo a different type of assessment and authorization. It is therefore necessary to adopt a community list of such permitted claims after consulting EFSA. Now, all claims were generally accepted scientific evidence, so it makes no sense at all. There's been a lot of tinkering going on with the particular draft, which was originally proposed by the European Commission. So it turns up we've got, if I can point out, we've got what was supposed to be the functional claims here and disease risk factor reduction. It's not in Australia or New Zealand. I think you have risk of disease reduction or risk reduction. We don't have that. It's risk factor reduction. It's not if a disease is being treated or if the risk of the disease, then you're into medical rather than food. At the last minute, children's claims were moved over there because the real division here was between Article 13.1 and Article 13.5. And Article 13.1 was the light touch. It was originally supposed to be for essentiality of nutrients, but it was changed so much that it actually is meaningless. And in fact, it's not quite right here. Increase in the sense of satiety, a reduction in the sense of hunger. There's no actual health relationship there unless it also means that you're reducing your food intake in those who need to lose weight. So something has happened, and I'll show you exactly what happened with this in a moment. Concept of essentiality. Now, I know there are a lot of nutritionists here, and I hate going into something that is so fundamental to nutrition, but it obviously a lot of the stakeholders in industry had never heard of this concept. Essentiality of nutrient can be determined by the observance of clinical symptoms of deficiency on dietary depletion of the nutrient and disappearance of such symptoms upon dietary depletion of the nutrient. And we also have knowledge in almost all instances of the essential role of a nutrient in metabolism, and that can also indicate essentiality. And this concept has been around for over 100 years. It's been the result of numerous Nobel Prizes. It's saved working out what was causing deficiency disease has saved numerous lives, millions of lives, and it was very important. It was the heyday of nutrition and made nutrition a science. So those concepts, those claims based on essentiality, you can't weigh them using the hierarchy of evidence because, first of all, with a randomized clinical control trial, you couldn't ethically look at a deficiency which is life-threatening and put somebody on placebo and somebody on the nutrient. You also can't deplete them, and you can look, all right, you could try interventions with people who are replete, but as we heard the first day, that if you're replete in a nutrient, you'll have no effect. So there's no way that you can demonstrate these from the hierarchy of evidence. So you have to do it some other way. And it's difficult to find a precise health relationship as symptoms of deficiency can affect some multiple functions, and difficult to predict the consequence of deficiency in organ or physiological systems. And as I've said, over 100 years, and often not garnered from human studies. So this is the hierarchy of evidence. It's a typical one. Some people might argue that down the line there, and points 2 and 3, the observational studies, that cohort studies are of higher order than case control studies, and I'll probably agree with that. But you can see at the top, you've got the randomized control trials, and they're very good reason for that. And you can see at the bottom, you've got expert opinion, and that's important to remember. And the hierarchy of evidence can be shown as a pyramid or whatever, and this is taken from the internet. You've randomized controlled studies at the top, right down, and you have it as shown that is likely that there are signs that are, and the lowest of all, experts are of the opinion that. So dealing with health claims relating to essentiality of nutrition is not necessarily appropriate to try to define a specific health relationship, which you have to do with all other nutrients or all other claims not based on the essentiality, and it's not necessary or appropriate to weigh the totality of evidence. Okay, claims under Article 13.1 then. This is what the whole business, the whole problems, and it was embarrassing at times as well as a headache as far as we are concerned in EFSA. So the Article 13.1, just to remind you, it's the ones here. It was supposed to be the light touch, but in actual fact, at the end of the day, the Commission told us to weigh everything, and the supplement industry took them to court over it, but the Commission won. So this is what we're talking about here, Article 13.1. Where did it all go wrong? Well, if you go back, and it's still on the internet, you go back and look at one of the earlier drafts of what turned out to be Article 13.1, it makes more sense now. It says, being based on long-established and non-controversial science, health claims that describe the role of a nutrient or other substance in growth, development, and normal physiological functions of the body shall undergo a different type of assessment. It was a light touch industry. Oh, a light touch, we'll have to get all our ridiculous claims in there. There's no other way we can get them substantiated, so we'll have to go there. So industry, because they opened everything up with Article 13.1, they expected a lot of 13.1. Originally, throughout the original legislation, it was nutrient, and industry got or other substance, and that was correct to put or other substance, but or other substance shouldn't have been inserted here, because once it was inserted here, then the politicians could change this to their own liking. So it made it open that all the ridiculous claims in the world and throughout the 28 member states could be included. Okay. So Article 13.1, it was supposed to be for essential nutrients. It was a light touch. So all you had here was a description of the food constituent, the health relationship, proposed wording, and conditions of use. And as far as the food constituent is concerned, this was quite simple. Xylitol sweetened chewing gum with 65% xylitol. But look at the health relationship. Ears. I mean, now, is it Noddy's ears, big ears, Midas's ears? Is it ringing in the ears? Is it pain in the ears? Is it infection in the ears? Is it about hearing? Is it about balance? I mean, you have no idea. And the other problem here is that this was all anonymous, so you couldn't get the phone and look and say, get in touch with the person and said, hello, is that David Cameron Smith? Are you the CEO of the company that made xylitol sweetened chewing gum? Oh, you are? Yes, good. Oh, I know you're a very busy person. This is EFSA calling. We have only one question for you. When you submitted that claim where you said the health relationship was ears, had you drink taken? And that's the only thing that you actually need to do. You could shut the phone down, but it got rid of the frustration that we had. What on earth were we supposed to do with these things? Because you couldn't do anything else with them. And what we did was that these claims, even though they were ridiculous, they came with 200 to 300 different references. So it meant that we had tens of thousands of references to try to source. So we employed a large number of people, maybe I think it was about 8 or 9 people. These were young people who had just finished their PhD or their first degree, and they were dead keen to start searching for all these references. But to keep themselves sane, because they soon found out that there was loads of things which were unscientific here about these references, they published a citation newsletter, and they published it once or twice a week. So these are some of the highlights that I took from it. I had loads of material. The first one, of course, is from that well-known source of evidence-based Science, the Bible. And just in case you don't know your chapter and verse, I've given it in full there. Judah and Israel gave you their finest wheat, fancy figs, honey, olive oil, and spices in exchange for your merchandise. Now, that's supposed to be a scientific substantiation of ginseng and cognitive performance. Now, I don't know what it has to do with ginseng and cognitive performance. In fact, I don't know what it's got to do with anything in this life or even the next. But that's the sort of thing that we were getting. We got two from the Bible. We got many more from this book of Beck, and I'm sure everybody's got it on their shelves, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Total Nutrition for Canadians. We got quite a number of those now. We can just say two things, that it's not only Canadians that read this book, and there are loads of idiots in Europe that were reading it, but I guess that's what we got from that. The next one's an interesting one. It's Hellman J. Data and Preparation Confidential. In fact, it was so confidential, that's all we got. We couldn't get anything else. There was an intervention of M46. It was finished in May 2006. There we had an anonymous one, and that was all that we had. Now, for those people in universities, if a student started to cite things at the end, and it didn't matter what level they were at, it wouldn't be a simple matter of just marking them down. You give them remedial tutorials to look, this is what you need so was it scientists and industry? I don't think it was. That reflects badly on universities, because universities are supposed to be training scientists from industry. This is the sort of nonsense that they get up to. Then there's something wrong. I think scientists were nothing to do with this. It was all the marketing, and as we know, marketing people have much more money, much more political clout than the scientists, and I think they were saying, oh, that could be a good marketing tool there. Well, let's make that claim. Now, this is all unregulated, of course, so they had every right to do this. And the reason that I look at it is that we've got quite a few things that only somebody in marketing, look at the fifth one there, only somebody in marketing could have the confidence to actually put that forward as to scientifically substantiate a claim. That one in the German tea industry. So it was a total nightmare. These youngsters also published a clarification newsletter. We made loads of mistakes, and one of the major mistakes we made is we sent a lot of these claims back for clarification. Now, if you send rubbish back to the source of that rubbish, you'll get rubbish in return. And what we wanted were vitamins, minerals, lysine, and we wanted to know what vitamins and minerals they wanted. And of course, this is what we got back, total nonsense. Carbohydrates from pasta, we got additional information, but of absolutely no use to us. Green tea extract, the same. My favourite is the antioxidants. Before antioxidants, that's what it was. After antioxidants, source of antioxidants from the list of health claims given a positive opinion by EFSA. So they were taking no chances there at all. And then there was the clarification newsletter on the health relationships. And probably industry had more problems with the health relationship than anything else. And you can see there's loads of nonsense there as well. But I'm sure you're all interested in what came back when we sent the ears back for the health relationship. This is what came back. Ears, clarification, inhibits the absorption of cholesterol, heart health. And, we had thought that there must have been about 30 different ways that you could do with the ears, but that was a difficult one. We hadn't anticipated that one at all. Now, there are advantages of submission by dossier. You can have, not only can you talk, just not simply on phone to people, but you can actually send things back to them because you know who it comes from. You can get the complete characterization of the food. You can get underlying hypothesis, a clear indication of the decision tree, and a case can be made for substantiation on the basis of pertinent studies. So after the fiasco of Article 13.1 with a light touch, everything else was by dossier. So weighing the evidence. And I've only got 4 minutes to do this, but points to consider in determining whether a study is pertinent to the claim. And human dietary studies are central for the substantiation of the claim, and I think you understand that from the hierarchy of evidence. The second one you think would be an obvious one. Does the study address the food constituent which has been characterised in the application? You'd be surprised how many times that doesn't happen. Now, I think the reason for it is the food industry wants a claim, a product-specific claim, to have a commercial advantage. And then they find that they don't have anything on their own product, but they'll put in studies from similar types of products. But if they want a product-specific claim, we need work and we need to see evidence in your product. The regulators and the risk managers, they don't like to see product-specific claims. They think all claims should be generic. But anyway, we respect what the industry wants. Does the study address endpoints of relevance to the health relationship as defined in the application? Is the study in the target population as indicated in the application, or could it be extrapolated to the target population? And if it's not, you can easily do something about it by changing the target population. Is the dosage or food matrix relevant to the proposed conditions of use? If it's not, you can change. And then you bring in the supportive studies in animals. But if you only got studies in animals and showing nothing in humans, then you can't use animals alone. But you can combine all of them, and what we look at is the totality of evidence, not just from human studies, but also from animal and in vitro studies. Again, the hierarchy of evidence, you can see where animals and in vitro studies come in here. They come in even under expert opinions. That's how low down animal studies are in the hierarchy of evidence. But nevertheless, they're part of the body of evidence. There's no question about that. And this is my final slide. I have 2 minutes on it. And really this explains why we've got a hierarchy of evidence and why human studies and human intervention studies are at the top of that. The two most important aspects of any condition for causality is you want to know, can you manipulate the effect? In other words, if you remove or put the food in to a person's diet, can you see changes in that effect? So in other words, it's experimental. And the other thing that you want to show clearly is that the effect, if you show it by experiment, is specific for that particular food. And the only way to get the first two conditions of causality, the two most important, is through human experiments. And the best type of human experiment is a randomized controlled trial, placebo-controlled trial. So there are very good reasons why randomized controlled trials are at the top of the hierarchy. Consistent associations with outcome measures. Now that can be bring in both all the animal studies that you want, all the observational studies, and also all the experiments. You want to see consistency. If you haven't got the consistency, then you doubt that you've got causality. Dose response. You don't necessarily have to show a dose response, but if you do have a dose response, then that adds to the causal inference. I've put size of the effect there in italics because we've had huge arguments as a working group and as a committee on the size of the effect. What we do is that we look at individual studies. We see, and obviously just looking at a p-value, there should be health warning in this. We say, is the p-value, is it significant as far as the p-value is concerned? Is it in the right direction? And then we say, okay, that study, it might have a very small effect, but it goes on to the evidence as a positive study. We can look at the size of the effect once we look at weighing of the evidence, but we don't look at the size of the effect only until we weigh the totality of the evidence. A plausible biological mechanism is very important. Some epidemiologists consider it to be most important, and you have to have a clear distinction there. In Europe, strangely enough, you don't have to have a plausible biological mechanism. In fact, theoretically, to get a claim through, you don't even have to know the active component, much less how it works. So the efficacy studies are very important, and you should, if you, at all possible, have a plausible biological mechanism. Now, we're often said that we're setting the bar too high for industry. I don't think we are. We're following the regulations. I don't see how any of those silly claims in Article 13 that came in, how we could possibly lower the bar low enough to actually get those substantiated. But at a time, I was named, and my colleague, who's also Irish, Albert Flynn, who was the top of the chair of the panel, we were accused of stopping innovation in the whole of Europe because we had made the bar too high for industry. I don't think it's right. The other question you get, is it more does it need more evidence for a benefit than for a harm? And I think it does, and there might be good reasons for that. The red meat, for example, the red meat didn't satisfy the first two. You had the red meat in cancer here. It was published before Christmas. It didn't, you wouldn't expect it to, because they trying to do an experiment with removing meat and waiting until cancer would be far too long. The consistent associations, it was 12 out of 18, and some of the negative ones actually showed that meat was negatively related to colorectal cancer. There was absolutely no dose response. The size of the effect was small, 1.18, 18% increase. It was supposed to be equivalent to smoking, risk of smoking. Smoking is 22, so there's a big difference in the size of the effect. And there was a couple of plausible biological mechanisms, but for the meat products, it's such a heterogeneous aspect that there are loads of different biological mechanisms there. I'm over my time, so I'd better stop there. Thank you.